Welcome, everyone. My name is Ryan Susky. I'm Director of Programs over at the Ohio Center for Law-Related Education, and I'm going to be serving as your facilitator for the Unit 4 hearing of the We the People National Invitational for Evergreen Middle School. In just a moment, I'm going to have the judges introduce themselves, followed by the students, of course, and then we will begin the hearing. The process for today is the students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 8 minutes of judge follow-up questions. Now, my microphone is going to be muted during the hearing, but I will be holding up time signs for you to see to let you know where you are in the process. For that reason, we do recommend that everyone uses the gallery view so that you can see my time cards and, of course, your colleagues during the hearing. At the conclusion of the hearing, judges will give brief feedback to teams, and then we'll be on our way. With that, I'll go ahead and hand things over to your chairperson to begin the introductions.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for coming to the National Invitational. The judges are going to introduce themselves, and then we'll ask you to introduce yourselves and your teacher. I'm Deshawn Whitaker, a We the People teacher in Charles County Public Schools in Maryland.
Sorry, my name is Joe Stewart. I teach in the Political Science Department at Clemson University in South Carolina. Relax. We're here to learn from you about the Constitution. We're just going to have a conversation. We're going to have some fun.
Hi, everyone. Congratulations on coming to the National Invitational. I'm Diana Owen, and I'm a political science professor at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C.
All right, and we would like you to introduce yourselves and your teacher.
Hello, we're from Evergreen Middle School. Our teacher is Ms. Kessler. My name is Audrey Yang.
Hi, I'm Pranav Takrani.
Good afternoon. My name is April Shi.
Hi, my name is Megha Ramachandran.
Hi, my name is Rachel D'Souza. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this is Unit 4, question 1. And I'm flipping it around. Yeah, I know. All right. And I'll read the question for you. An American historian claims that the Ratification Debates were one of the greatest and most probing public debates in American history. Do you agree or disagree? Why? What evidence can you offer to support your response? Evaluate the major arguments the Federalists advanced in support of the ratification of the Constitution. Evaluate the major arguments the Anti-Federalists put forth in opposition to ratification of the Constitution. Why did a Bill of Rights become a focal point for both the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists? You may begin.
We agree that the ratification debates were some of the greatest and most probing public debates in American history, laying the groundwork for the Constitution the United States rests on today and framing how the American government would function for years to come. The ratification debates allowed for all viewpoints to be heard. This paved the way for additions such as the Constitution's amendments and the Bill of Rights, which stand as the greatest reminder of the freedoms possessed by the American citizens.
The Federalist Party fought for the adoption of the Constitution, favoring weaker state governments and a strong centralized government. The Federalists thought it necessary to create a more perfect union by improving the relationship among states under a common leader. They advocated for an intricate system of checks and balances, the indirect election of government officials, long-term limits for office holders, and representative rather than direct democracy.
In 1788, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay published the most powerful defense of the new Constitution, a series of 85 essays known as the Federalist Papers. These papers were a collection of essays written to combat anti-federalism and to persuade the public of the Constitution's necessity. In the Federalist Papers, the need for an adequate central government was stressed, and it argued that a republican form of government could easily be adapted to the large territory and the divergent interests of the nation.
The Constitution proposed for ratification was vastly different from its predecessor, the Articles of Confederation. While the Articles had numerous flaws, they garnered strong support from anti-federalists, who were wary of a central government with excessive power over the people. Anti-federalists preferred a system that granted more liberties and power to state governments, who they believed could better represent their citizens. They argued that a strong central government could become like the monarchy experienced in Great Britain. This was represented under the Articles of Confederation, which held little power to enforce its regulations. The Articles did not allow for an executive or judicial branch and were impossible to amend. The lack of popularity of the Articles led to the creation of the Constitution.
The Constitution aligned with Federalist viewpoints, creating a strong central government. This led to opposition from the Anti-Federalists, who asserted that the proposed plan was dangerous due to the lack of a Bill of Rights and the powers granted to the central government. Called into question was Article 1, Section 8 of the document, which gave Congress the power to create all laws necessary and proper for the implementation of the Constitution. Anti-Federalists posited this clause granted Congress excessive power, further threatening the liberties of citizens. The Supremacy Clause, a clause that allowed federal rulings to take precedent over state laws, was also a major point of contention, as it was a specific exercise of federalism.
In order to adopt the Constitution, support was required from at least 9 states, but as Anti-Federalists remained opposed, modifications had to be made. The Anti-Federalists wanted a Bill of Rights, maintaining that without a Bill of Rights, the government would be able to violate citizens' natural rights.
Conversely, Federalists believed a Bill of Rights was not needed. In their eyes, the Constitution already protected people's rights. They argued that a Constitution did not give the government the power to deprive people of their rights, and a Bill of Rights would have given the impression that the people could only expect protection for the rights explicitly listed. However, for the Constitution to garner enough support to be ratified, a compromise was needed, and thus the drafting of the Bill of Rights became a focal point.
Through the ratification debates and the compromise between Federalists and Anti-Federalists, the required 9 states ratified the Constitution. The Constitution provides Americans with rights fundamental to democracy today, laying a groundwork for the country to stand on, thus making the ratification debates the most probing debates in American history. This concludes our testimony.
Thank you so much. My first question, I want to talk about the necessary and proper clause. You mentioned that the Anti-Federalists were strongly against it. Can you think of any examples from today where they could say, you know, I told you so?
One example is in the case Prince v. United States, or in the case National Federation of Independent Business v. Sebelius, where President Barack Obama's Affordable Care Act was challenged, and many would argue that that was not a necessary case. However, the necessary and proper clause was used to determine that case.
In addition, there is also the state of Missouri v. Holland in 1920, in which Great Britain and the US entered into a treaty to protect birds and also arrest citizens who didn't comply with this. And as a result, the state of Missouri said that this treaty said that the Constitution did not give Congress this power, and the Supreme Court ruled that this treaty was the supreme law of the land and ruled against Missouri. And there was a lot of blowback against
My colleague asked about the necessary and proper clause. I want us to look at the Supremacy Clause. Would we have had a new Constitution, or if we had not had a Supremacy Clause, would that have just left us with the good old Articles of Confederation? I mean, wasn't that a necessary clause in the new Constitution?
I don't think it would be the Articles of Confederation necessarily, because the Anti-Federalists proposed that there were more modifications to be needed outside of the necessary and proper clause. For example, the Supremacy Clause is one, and they believed that a Bill of Rights was also necessary. So it wouldn't be exactly like the Articles of Confederation.
You mentioned that there was a lot of compromise that went into the ratification of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Can you discuss at least 1 or 2 of the compromises that were reached in order for us to achieve, or the country to achieve, ratification?
Well, the main one would be the Bill of Rights, because as we said, that was the focal point in which the Anti-Federalists and Federalists had to reach a compromise in that case, and that meant getting the Bill of Rights. So that would be one main example of a compromise.
Yeah, because the Anti-Federalists, their main argument was that the Federalists did not give the people enough rights, and there wasn't enough democracy. So the Bill of Rights included more rights for the people.
To add on to my colleagues, many of the larger US states were opposed to adopting the Constitution because they feared that since they were larger and more populous, they would not get enough representation in Senate. as Senate is based around equal representation for all states, but they ended up adopting the Constitution, which was a compromise.
All right, thank you. How and why did the state ratifying conventions exemplify the principle of popular sovereignty?
Could you clarify what you meant by exemplify? Sorry, I think.
Yeah, I was muted. So there were ratifying conventions at the state level. And why does this, how is this like popular sovereignty? How does this show popular sovereignty? So let's start, maybe we can start from the top. Let's talk about popular sovereignty. Can you define that for us?
Well, isn't that like the government's authority should be buttressed and sustained by the belief of the majority opinion of the citizens?
No.
All right, and so how do the ratifying conventions, how are the ratifying conventions an example of that?
Well, there were a lot of states that didn't want to ratify. Mainly that would be Rhode Island. I don't have exact empirical evidence as to why Rhode Island didn't want to, but I assume that it did have something to do with the fact that there was popular sovereignty, that the citizens were not a fan of the Bill of Rights, and that is why Rhode Island dragged on their ratifying of the Constitution for so long.
Among the rights that were put into the Bill of Rights, which of those do you think is, or perhaps are, if you're plural, do you think is most important, and why?
I would say the First Amendment, because that grants the freedom of speech, religion, assembly, and petitioning the government. And obviously the First Amendment is so vital to how we operate today. And I think that it's part of the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, the freedom of citizens to be able to speak their minds, that really makes something a democracy. And as America is built on the foundation of democracy, I don't think that America will look the same without the First Amendment. One prime example would be Tinker v. Des Moines. Although it can't be said that the verdict would have been completely different, I do believe that the way that Tinker v. Des Moines was argued, without the First Amendment, that would have been completely different. And there could have possibly been a different verdict as well.
To add on to my colleague, the 9th and 10th Amendments, although they can be regarded as being vague and not listing explicit rights, they're also very important and have been used to decide many cases, as they also exemplify the compromise that was made between anti-federalists and federalists. And if the first 8 amendments were the only rights that American citizens had, it would be very unclear as to if citizens could expect only those rights or more.
I have to agree with my colleague Audrey here, because I think that the First Amendment was actually a building block of the democracy that we have in place today. And the freedom of speech and religion were like the main parts. And because of that, we're not like, we have that democracy that we have in place today.
Ask a quick question. Can you talk about the difference between a Republican government and a democracy? What is the characteristic of a Republican government?
I'm sorry, I don't think that we're all super clear on that. Could you please expand on that?
What you mentioned in your opening statement that, basically with the ratification of the Constitution, you founded a Republican government. And so what does it mean to be a Republican government? Who who represents people in a Republican government?
In a Republican government, the people have the option to elect representatives to represent them in making decisions.
Great, thank you.
And you get the final words.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed your presentation a lot, and now's the time that you get some feedback from the judges. And wait, I'm not.
Please continue. Please continue.
No.
You're fine. You're
so
fine. You're
sorry.
fine. No, you are fine. All right. So yeah, as she mentioned, you're going to get some feedback from us. I think your opening statements and your presentation were very well done. You had extensive knowledge about the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists and their concerns about the new Constitution. I appreciated your follow-up in the feedback question too that I asked you regarding the necessary and proper clause. And I wish we would have had some more time to discuss that and the Supremacy Clause as well, if we could have had some more time to discuss. You worked very well as a team. Everybody got a chance to speak and you respectfully agreed and disagreed with each other, which is always great in these kinds of hearings. And I enjoyed speaking with you today, and my colleagues will give you further feedback, and very well done.
Yeah, let me follow up with that. I like the way you took the clear position to begin with, answering the question, that you agreed with the quote with which the question begins. Wish we'd had some more time to talk about. You talked about the amendments as a reminder that we have the system working, and you talked about how the Federalist Papers were an attempt to persuade the public on this. I wish we'd had time to tease that out because it's a relevant public. It's which got at some of the questions we were asking about the ratification process. Finally, I'll mention that I appreciated the reference to appropriate court cases, although Missouri versus Holland, I would argue, probably has more to do straight with just the treaty making power that's in the Constitution. But it is a case that I used to teach until I had some biology majors in my class. It's a case that involves migratory birds. And I had a student that totally missed the constitutional point, but told me all about the genus species of the migratory birds that were involved. So if you go on to take American government at the collegiate level, and they mention Missouri versus Holland, focus on the constitutional aspects, not the biological aspects. Also appreciated the mention of Tinker. You're right, but that was the high water point. It's the last time the court has ruled in favor of students in reference to free speech, and we just had a case argued before the Supreme Court this past week that is directly relevant. So I'll be interested to see whether they go back toward Tinker or they stay away from Tinker. But I've very much enjoyed our conversation today. Very good job. You represented your school and state well. Thank you.
So now I'll take my turn. I'm sorry about that before. I would agree with my colleagues with basically all of their comments. I thought that your opening statement was filled with a lot of good information. It was well organized. I thought I liked the way that you brought up the necessary and proper clause and the supremacy clause, and then we're able to address that later on in the follow-up questions. I also was really impressed with your knowledge of Supreme Court cases and how you talked about the different amendments to the Constitution, the First Amendment, the Ninth Amendment, the 10th Amendment, and put them in a proper context. So really nice job, and really enjoyed the discussion today.